Hey, I'm J.R. Lay, and welcome back to the Level Up Business Podcast. Every entrepreneur fights to gain attention from the market, from their prospects, but here's the hard truth. Once you earn that attention, most businesses burn and waste that attention. That's why I'd like to introduce you today to James De Roche, founder of Lead Comet. You see, before becoming an entrepreneur himself, James was a teacher. He was a teacher at some of the toughest classrooms where he literally had just minutes to grab the attention of the kids and then deliver value before losing the entire room. James applied those lessons as a teacher to both gain and keep the attention of his students, to build and master the craft, the art of creating sales-ready case studies that they don't just tell stories. They both get and keep attention of prospects, and as a result, they close more deals. In my conversation with James, we unpack why traditional case studies fail and how to turn them into buyer-focused trust builders. James and I also explore the 4 critical elements that every case study must address to move prospects from curiosity to commitment. So, if you have been struggling to transform attention into action, this episode is going to give you the blueprint. It's going to give you the path forward to level up your business and your life. But first, if you are a visionary entrepreneur who wants to transform your past experience being one of the most valuable assets you have as an entrepreneur, you want to transform that experience into IP that elevates your influence and increases your income, send me a text, 832-240-1922. That's because I want to teach you. I want to show you how you can turn video content just like this into a published book that monetizes your unique wisdom. Now, let's get ready to learn. Let's get ready to grow. Let's get ready to level up with James De Roche. Welcome to the show, James. Man, before we get into talking about interview-driven case studies, I want to just hit the pause button a bit because you have a very interesting story that got you to this point. We've made some connections as well, but you were a teacher.
I was a teacher, yeah.
You were and you're an author.
I am an author, yeah. I don't talk about that too much, but yeah, I am.
I think it's fascinating, though, whenever you and I connected, because, I mean, this is the unique wisdom that I want to unlock and share to help others level up. Because when you think about the entrepreneurial journey, there's not a right way, there's not a wrong way. There's multiple ways. And you think about, like, the way, the Tao in Eastern philosophy, or the way is what C.S. Lewis was writing about back in the day. And I've taken the idea of the way, or the Tao, D-A-O. It all comes down to a decision or an indecision, an action or an inaction. And that will lead to the outcome of your decisions, your actions combined. So when you think back to, the journey that you were on to become the founder of Lead Comet, you're a teacher.
Yeah.
But you took lessons from that experience into this path, into this journey, because it's about connection. It's like you have to connect with the kids, and you only had a little bit of like you told me before, you had a little bit of time to make that connection, to make that impact in their life.
Yeah, I was so I taught at a school in northern Denver in Thornton, actually, for 5 years. At one school for 1 year and another school for 4 years. And it was 9th and 10th grade, and it was a hard to serve school. So a lot of free and reduced lunch. You had a lot of students that had very difficult lives, very chaotic homes, and education
Title I,
was,
right?
yeah, Title I. Education was a thing that they had to do, but really didn't really have the context for like what it would unlock for their future. So their parents, a lot of them hadn't even completed high school, and so they were kind of forerunners in their households. You had students that had 2 or 3 families to a home, sometimes crammed into apartment complexes. They had this really chaotic external life, and then you're told in university that you've got to teach them how to write better essays and answer questions on a test that's standardized better, and you're going in there going like, how do I jump this gulf, because they've got so many other priorities, so much other craziness, and what you're running in that classroom, what you're teaching in that classroom is really far down on the list unless you can sell it basically every single day. You have a tiny window of opportunity before attention starts to drift. And if you've ever been in front of an audience, you can see this. If you've ever been in front of an audience with kids, you can see it really quickly too. It's subtle at first. The eyes kind of glaze over. They start to stare out. They're looking down at their shoes, and then you kind of have the behavioral problems that will creep in. But it's you've got a couple minutes, and so usually the best run classrooms, you land with a lesson that has a hook, grabs them in there right from the start. You clearly explain what they're going to learn during that block of time. So you set the expectation, and you have to pull it in and connect, your audience with something that's extremely relevant to them. So you've got to be able to read the room. You've got to know your students. You got to know your audience so that you can make those connections in their life. And then you kind of got to let them do their thing afterwards. So you can't stand in front of an audience and just talk for 50 minutes and expect them to pay attention the entire time, especially with students, because the attention spans are low, and they want to be actionable and start kind of applying that. So it was really every day, and it didn't matter how well you sold it the day before, because every lesson was like another masterclass in having to get their attention this time, because
Right.
today is the only thing that mattered, and then just kind of start over and over.
So what you just said, the number one thing that I took from that I want to reiterate for others watching or listening, and I think it's very applicable, it's attention.
Yeah.
It's attention. And if you think about, and one of the things that I wrote about in my book Banking on Change is the question, who is on your team? Time, energy, attention, money. And there's this attention piece that I think, particularly in the context of the entrepreneurial world, marketing, sales, business, our attention is extremely short. And furthermore, what's important to us is probably not important to 99.999% of the rest of the world.
Mhm.
And so it's a matter of perspective. But if we come back to your experience, there's a very tiny window to capture, retain attention, and then provide value when we have that attention. It's like that's one of the reasons. Like I remember maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago, we were having a team meeting, and I told the team, I was like, listen, we have to be very grateful for the time, energy, attention that people invest to watch and to listen to the podcast,
Mhm.
because there's a bazillion other things that they could be doing. So it has to, that's why every podcast, and we'll get here in a little bit, what's one thing that someone can do next based upon what we've talked about today? Because there always has to be some sort of an action that comes from it. Otherwise, it's a bunch of
Mhm.
data. Now, come back to your point of attention and that little tiny window. And I think about journalism, like don't bury the lead. How
Yeah.
does that transition to the work you're doing with, and I love the framing, interview driven case studies that build trust and they kill objections.
Yeah.
And before we get there, let's just talk about the case study, because that's just, it's been around for a while. Um, what are the problems you see with the word case? It could be even triggering for some people when you hear case study, like, oh my gosh, another case study. Oh, those things are just, they're boring. They're a waste of time. They really don't help make a decision. What are those common misconceptions you hear with case studies?
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a step back here because
Sure.
how this ties into the attention and the priority in the window there is that you work so hard in a business to earn attention, and then once you have that attention, a lot of businesses burn that opportunity, and they burn
Mm,
that opportunity by leading with a lack of personalization, a lack of value. You've crawled through broken glass and underneath the Constantine wire, and you're finally on the other side, and you're like, hey, I've got you here, and then it's like here's this marketing asset that's kind of packed full of fluff and isn't really written for me, and you haven't taken the time to figure out my role or what I do or any of that stuff that shows that you actually care, and then I'm not just the target that you're trying to move deeper into your funnel. And people are smart at this point in time. Like we've evolved past, the 2016 use of the internet. I think the general buyer's audience is quite sophisticated. They've seen a lot of these tactics play out. They're frustrated with them. And so when you try to lead with a case study, and it is clearly this PR, internal comms asset that's very surface level from the top. And I'm talking like, you open up the document and you immediately see they chose us because of our, 15 years of experience and our, long-term relationship and blah, 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 blah. So it's like, okay, you finally got my
I hear
attention.
Charlie Brown. Wah, wah, wah,
Wah,
wah.
wah, 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 wah. Like, I'm busy. I've got things going on. You've got this tiny window of attention, and you've just wasted 2 minutes of it with stuff that I don't care about as a buyer. And so that's a huge problem with case studies. You see quite often it is a very powerful asset because it really is a CV of a business. You're proving that you can show up and do the work at a level that is beyond your competitors, that you actually get real results. If you are an employee sitting across the table from a hiring committee, you have to be able to answer these kinds of high level questions to be able to prove that you are worthy of that role, that you can commit to the team and that you can deliver. And the same is true with a business in their case studies, but it's often kind of deprioritized and turned into this kind of generalized marketing asset, which has become known as boring, a waste of time. It's very surface level. It follows this kind of traditional framework that just doesn't really work anymore with how buyers buy, with how LLMs support the buying journey, with
Ooh, I'm
multiple
glad you brought that up.
stakeholders within an organization. You've got a very dated playbook. Now, there's nothing wrong with the case study as itself, as a proof point that your organization can actually do the stuff that you're talking about. The problem is that the format has been watered down for quite some time. And
Mm.
it's coming at, businesses from a time where having a digital presence alone was enough to be ahead of other businesses. In 2016, you were like convincing firms that they should have a blog. And we're past that now. But like the case studies, they literally look the same. They have not evolved in like 10 years. They still look like they did when they were published back then. And we have to change them. We have to update them. And that means writing for people with focused attentions.
Well, let's do a little comparison and contrast here because a few weeks ago you had shared a video to where you have the CSR case study model and then the sales ready case study. For context, what do you mean by the CSR case study model, and what are some of the perhaps the and you have probably already addressed those challenges there, but
So yeah, we call it just the traditional case study framework is a CSR. It's challenge, solution, result. Um, and ironically, it doesn't really follow that model. Like the challenge will be wrapped in with a client overview and part
mhm,
process, but it's basically a project that's broken down into usually three segments: challenge, solution, and result.
mhm,
The sales ready case study, it's very similar to how you would write a journalistic piece. It's an inverted pyramid. So you lead with the most important details at the start. You then go from that, you explain and get more granular. And that allows people at different positions within an organization, if they're looking at it, to get the information that they need as quickly as possible. And then bounce once that those questions have been answered. And if you read to the end, it's obviously like some articles, it's because you're hyper interested and you're very curious about, the asset there. It's no different than reading a piece by the Wall Street Journal if you finish it. Otherwise you skim it, get what you need, and you move on so you can make a decision. But you're leading with the most important information first. And so with a sales ready case study, it is first and foremost a sales asset. We're not talking about brand. We're not talking about internal PR. We're not talking about, handshakes and head nods to your current clients that you guys did great work. We're talking about creating an asset that can be used to close more deals. You're using previous work to start conversations about new work. So
mm,
that's the focus there, as opposed to a lot of the CSR type case studies, which is just a project recap.
right. Do you know Blair ends
No.
win without pitching?
Okay.
So Blair ends really influenced my thinking almost 13 years ago, as I was pivoting a business back then, I had worked with David C. Baker, and he had then recommended Blair. I had worked with Blair, and Blair wrote Win Without Pitching. And one of the things that he was sharing at the time, and I really didn't understand it back then. I think I was just, and here's why. He was talking about what's called a process framed case study, to where the case study is framed around the methodology, the process that you have guided someone through. And when I think about, well, why didn't I understand it? Well, it's very simple. I didn't have a process back then. I didn't have a framework. I didn't have a methodology. So no wonder I was completely lost. But as you're mentioning here with a sales ready case study, it's taking someone on a journey that you've already taken someone on. So therefore, it's like, I've done it once. I can do it again. I can do it for you. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to feel like as you progress through these steps. Am I understanding this
Yeah.
correctly here?
Yeah, and you do map out the process in a sales ready case study because you have to understand that people are going to read it and skim it and look at it with a variety of tools. You know, they might plug it into a GPT and ask it just to give me a summary. They might find you through a GPT and it needs to have that granularity to kind of pull it in there. Or they might read it because they're interested and they've been tasked to find vendors. I mean, we have a client that they got they generated a new business because the CMO of the company was looking for vendors. So the CMO is not, and they're a very technical space, and so they actually, in order for them to close a deal, they're sitting down with the CTO or CIO in that organization and sitting there and talking to them. But originally, the CMO brought them in, and so people automatically think that your immediate champion or buyer is going to be somebody who knows your space really well and is absolutely in charge of the work that you do, but that's not always the case. So they might need more background and granular details to be able to make that effective decision to kind of move you forward and shortlist your firm. And so having the process in there where it says like we did this and this and this and this and this, and it's a very specific process that's clear that you guys know what you're doing. It has the granular details in there that know that you haven't just decided on this one project that this is a thing that we did this one time. They
Right.
can forward that to the appropriate person in the organization. They can take a glance at it and say like, yeah, that's legit. Let's talk to them. They kind of know what they're doing. They've got a system in place. Most times, and like again in the CSR, you'll hear we used our methodology or we used our proven process, and that's the only time it's mentioned, and it's never talked about again. So you're like, I wonder what that is, and then it turns out to be like agile or something that's pretty by the book. But
Yeah.
you have to show how you attack a project so people can see how your firm thinks, how they organize themselves, how they answer the problem that you have.
That brings up a very interesting point in my mind, just like literally went a bazillion different directions. So I'm going to try to articulate this with some clarity, and then I'm going to come back to that word clarity. You know what? I'm actually going to write this down, because I will forget. But I think it's an important point to loop back around to. How valuable will it be going forward when you think about the agentic web, large language search? We don't even know what to call this. It's like where everyone's calling a little bit of a different thing. And I think Pete Caputa, who I'll be having another conversation with on the podcast here in just a bit, one of the things that he posted on LinkedIn, can't we just call it AI search? I'm like, profound. I mean, because that's essentially that's what a lot of people are using AI for right now. It's in and I was observing this myself. It's like you take your patterns of behavior of Google search and you just put it into the new quote unquote the new tool. But how important will it be for organizations to have a defined methodology? And the way that I look at this is we call it unique wisdom, and unique wisdom equals an organization's unique perspective, their lived, learned, shared experiences, that's then further multiplied by their unique methods, their models, their frameworks, their systems that are traditionally packaged up and even better visualized that are built from their unique perspective. So,
Hmm.
because like you said, well, it's our proprietary process, but in reality, it's like agile or something like that,
Yeah.
commonly known. But how important will that be, particularly when you're thinking about sales ready case studies as a differentiation in the market?
I think the more granular you can get, the more you're going to stand out. I think that's a really, really important point that anybody listening to this to take away. You have to have that granularity because what we're seeing right now with these LLM tools is they're great at getting you from 0 to 70, like passing score in school. But they're also great at taking you from 100 and dropping you back at 70. And so you've got to be really careful about that. And the granularity is what helps you stand out. What I would caution against is, trying to invent a process when you don't have one. If you use Agile, just say you use Agile and put it in the flow that you have because that's how you approach the project. When you start hyping things up with marketing, fluff and BS and jargon, like people see through that. And they've been in the space. Whoever is the first in looking at your case study or evaluating your business, they might not, but sooner or later, whatever expert you're going to be working in within the organization is going to go like, I roll. They're just talking about X. Everybody does that. It's not that special. That's
Right.
just not a good impression that you want to have at any point during the buying cycle. Like when it's a relationship when you're selling services, consulting. You want that kind of positivity to hit the start and continue onward. And if you come out of the gate sounding like you're trying to overemphasize what you do, then it kind of betrays a lack of confidence in your abilities or a lack of expertise. So I think if you don't have a clearly defined, unique process, say what you do, build towards that, do enough of the same thing to where you can kind of devise your own methodology around that and
Yeah.
make it your own unique thing. But I think that the honesty thing, especially what people's BS filters are so high right now, is that AI. Is that real? Does this person actually know what they're talking about? Do they just spit something out really quick so they can sound smart? Like you don't want to be caught into that web of this business is just full of themselves. They're over exaggerating their capabilities.
Well, it's trust, it's
Yeah.
truth, it's transparency, and I agree. Like it, that those three lenses, trust, truth, transparency, I think are going to be critical as a way to differentiate in a, I forget who wrote this, in a time of great deceit, telling
Mm.
the truth is a revolutionary idea, and I'm paraphrasing on that. I think it might have been Orwell. I don't remember. 19. I can't honestly remember who that was. But I want to come back to the point you mentioned before. It's like not everyone's gonna when you're working with an organization, not everyone's going to have that same perspective. Not everyone's going to have a unified perspective. Everyone's going to be approaching the problem from their lived, learned, shared experience. But the idea of a sales ready case study can help to transform confusion into clarity, can help transform chaos into courage, can help transform conflict into commitment. Because you're is it helping people get on the same page? Is it helping people to gain a common language?
Yeah,
Then
I think people underestimate like what a really well constructed case study can do because it typically they tell you when you're writing you have one audience, one message, one action. But with a case study, you have more than one audience. There is more than
sure,
one person getting the information from that. They might take it in bite-sized chunks. It might be disseminated within the organization, but it's got to serve multiple stakeholders. So it really is kind of unifying everybody across the organization and taking the anxiety away from the choice. Because when you're selling any
hmm
of these complex services, like you're selling basically the hope that you can come in and make the business better because nobody wants to be the person that vouched for a firm that cost 300K and had absolutely no impact on the business other than upsetting the team. Right? That's the worst case scenario for a lot of these firms. I just put my reputation on the line. I created a bunch of discomfort for my team. I lost trust, and we lost a bunch of money. And now I either have to go work somewhere else, or I have to work hard to regain that trust.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like you don't have a dashboard or widget or something you can hold with most services. You have to envision the future of your business based
Right.
on the work that the firm that wants to engage with you has done with other types of businesses like yours, hopefully.
I really appreciate that, and I think about Donald Miller's perspective. If you confuse, you lose,
Yeah.
and it's almost like what we're wanting to do is move from complexity to simplicity. But simplicity oftentimes can be an exercise in complexity because it's about removing all of the fluff. To come back to your point before, as we wrap up here, and to send someone off who has continued to invest their time, energy, attention with both of us, what would be the one thing that they can do next, this small little action that they can take to level up their own case studies?
So I would take a look at your most recent asset that you've published and ask yourself, if you were a buyer, could you confidently make a decision based on the information that's provided there? And you've got to strip away the bias and the understanding of the industry. Put yourself really in the buyer's shoes. Understand what's at stake. Understand their cost of inaction, the unknown unknowns that they don't know about, the risk, the urgency. Those are four very critical pillars in any sales asset, especially case studies.
Mm-hmm.
To see things from the buyer's perspective and then ask if does that asset help them better understand how you help them avoid that situation. Because most case studies are written about the business for the business without any understanding of the buyer and the situation that they're in. It's like they woke up one day and decided to spend $500,000. Nobody does that.
Like a lack of empathy,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. There's a total lack of empathy. So just do that with your most recent case study. And if you haven't, rewrite it for the buyer. Put them at the
Mm.
center of it. So yeah, it's focusing on urgency, risk, cost of inaction, and stakes. That's what your case study needs to cover. If it doesn't, rewrite it so that it addresses those.
Well, listen, man, I really appreciate your perspective to help others level up their case studies. This is a good discussion, something that we have not talked about before on this podcast, and I think is extremely practical and very, very timely, particularly as we're moving in further into the age of AI. But it comes down to the human experience, and it comes down to the empathy. And if someone wants to connect with you and continue the conversation that we've started here, what's the best way for them to reach out and say hello?
Yeah, just reach out to me at Lead Comet James on LinkedIn and shoot me a DM and connect. Happy to chat.
Connect with James, learn with James, learn, grow, level up together with James. I appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you again for tuning in to learn, to grow, to level up together with James's unique wisdom. If you are a visionary entrepreneur who wants to transform your past experience into IP that elevates your influence and increases your income, send me a text right now, 832-240-1922, because I want to teach you. I want to show you how you can turn video content just like this into a book that monetizes your unique wisdom.